Welcome to M Talk, brought to you by the M Scale, where we talk all things menstruation. We interview the best and brightest, working across multiple fields, all with the same mission: to make the lives of people who menstruate a little bit easier. Hello, good morning. How are you? Thank you for tuning in to M Talk by the M Scale. For those who don't know me, I am your host, Annabelle. I am the founder of the M Scale, which is an app. Previously, it was just an app, and now we're kind of an entire menstrual movement trying to improve the lives of people who menstruate everywhere by removing period stigma and anxiety. But before that, I was a film and television executive, and I like to think I know a good story when I see one. So I'm so happy to bring you riveting interviews by people working on the forefront of technology and health and medicine and advocacy, all for us who have to deal with menstruation. So without further ado, let's get into it. We want to put a trigger warning on this episode, as the conversation is incredibly heavy and there may be some content that some audience members find distressing. Following on from the previous episode, we are talking to Reality Winner today about her first-hand experience in both Lincoln County Jail and the Federal Medical Center in Texas. Reality's name has been in the news cycle since 2017, when she was arrested for leaking a classified document to the public and was then served a 63-month sentence, the longest ever handed to any previous whistleblower. She has recently released a book titled I Am Not Your Enemy about the entire ordeal, and it is a phenomenal read. I cannot recommend it enough. But in particular, I love the voice it gives to the oppressive system of incarceration in America and the cruelty that goes with it. That's why today she is sharing with us her first-hand eyewitness account of how women are treated in the US incarceration system, especially when it comes to basic necessities and health care. So welcome, Reality.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for being here. I wanted to tell the audience, so you actually first came to my attention because potentially your name might feel a bit notorious in America, but as we're mostly based outside of America, you first came to my attention when you commented on a reel that we had shared, some UGC content about a woman in Kentucky who was at her hearing, and she was denied period products and like clean clothes essentially, and she'd soiled her clothes with period blood. And you kind of raised a flag and said, oh yeah, it's definitely like this, like it's worse than this. And I wanted to say that almost inspired this entire podcast, just that small interaction, because I felt a bit gross about sharing that video and just doing it to sort of draw attention to what we're doing, but not actually giving a voice to the woman in the video or anyone in that system. And it actually really made me reflect and go, okay, I don't really like this just sharing for the sake of sharing stuff. I think that we should probably have a conversation about it. Hence, here we are. So I wanted to thank you for that, first and foremost. I think we should start with the caveat for people listening that you didn't actually experience a period in prison, per se.
Right.
But rather you're here on behalf of the activism you do to represent all women within the incarceration system and highlight sort of the mistreatment that they experience. Do you want to share with the audience why you didn't actually have a period in prison?
Yeah. So I actually didn't know that this was like a common way to feel growing up, but like reading more memoirs from women and talking to other women, it just seems like in our teenage years, we all kind of go through this common thing where it's like, how do I just never have a period? Like, I hate this about myself so much. And like when you reach your 20s and you just really inherently understand that you will never have kids, it's like the hatred you direct towards your body. Like, well, why are you still doing this? And so the last procedure I did right before I got out of the military was to have my tubes removed. And in doing so, they wanted to place an IUD just in case, like for like an ectopic pregnancy could have been possible. They wanted to catch every like possibility. And for me personally, that was how I was preparing to go to Afghanistan, because I just knew that 1 in 2 women in these deployed positions is sexually harassed, assaulted, raped, you name it. And it's not always by the enemy. And so I just thought I was going to go out there and I wanted to be boots on the ground as a linguist, as an interpreter, reuniting families, talking to people. And I just knew like the possibility of getting kidnapped was high, but also just living on a US base with soldiers, our own soldiers, it would be a high possibility of assault. And I didn't want the rest of my life to depend on birth control. And so by having my tubes removed and having the IUD placed, I kind of was able to continue on, the previous 4 years of having a severe eating disorder and never having a period, to do so medically. And so I have not had a reliable, consistent, or even a regular flow since like 2012, 2013. And of course, now the IUD is long since like it's very expired, and I'm sure it's fused to my cervix in some way. But of course, because we're women, and even though it's an invasive surgical procedure, we're not given anything beyond Tylenol. Like, you cannot find a doctor that will anesthetize you for an IUD removal. So I guess I'm just not going to get it removed.
Right. That is a shocking thing. I have seen a bit of progress. I don't know if it's a case of where you are, but I have seen progress where they're starting to make it a bit more mandatory to offer pain relief for these sorts of procedures. So maybe there's hope one day that you can go in and get that removed. So I did want to ask, and this is not off topic. I mean, we're going to get to the main topic of conversation, but was it hard for you to get your tubes removed? Did you have to, like, were they resistant to you deciding you didn't want children?
Yeah, so I basically put together like a 5-step list with an optional PowerPoint that I was going to present to the doctors. And there was a group of us because we had to have like group counseling before we could have our one-on-one consultation with the doctors. And all the other women in the room were married, they already had kids. Maybe they had already had like, traumatic birth experiences before that with like medical issues. So they just like getting their tubes removed was a matter of life or death. And I was sitting there, 23 years old and like waiting for my chance to speak to this male doctor. And I went through all of my reasons as to why, as to like my career, the way I feel, my eating disorders, my upcoming deployment to Afghanistan, the fact that I had signed like this climate pledge that we're not going to add to the population because like literally this planet can only support like 7 billion of us. You know what I mean? And I was like, I'm very serious about this. Like, I'm not having children. And I was given like to my face, I didn't even know this was a thing. And it is so true in the United States. Your doctor will cite a hypothetical, imaginary future husband who might want children. And I was just like, I'm not even in a relationship. Like I've like not had a healthy relationship yet. You know what I mean? Like I can't even get a man to like be in an open legal relationship with me. Like the last guy was married and bipolar. Like I don't think that's an issue. And I did not understand that they could deny a medical procedure that I was requesting based on an imaginary future man.
Which is also crazy because if you don't want children, hopefully your imaginary future man also doesn't want children, right? Like there are people
Exactly.
out there.
And that's the crazy thing is like I was doing this because I was physically preparing myself basically to be raped with the fewest consequences ever. And you're just like, oh, well, your future husband's going to rape you and make you pregnant anyway. And I'm okay with that as a medical doctor. Like, and so a nurse was in the room with us and she heard it. And I got sent back to like the group counseling room because we had to like enter and leave as a group. And she pulled me aside and she said, hey, come with me. There's one more surgeon. And so she introduced me to a female doctor, female surgeon, and I gave her my reasons. And she said, this is perfectly reasonable, actually. She's like, I understand where you're coming from. She was military, like we were both wearing fatigues. And she was like, no, I've been to Afghanistan several times. I know what you're talking about. And you seem very determined to go. And she's just like, and the climate thing, like, it doesn't matter where your career takes you, you're not having kids. And I get that. But she had told me, she said, if I call you and I give you 2 days notice for this surgery at any given time, can you get a ride here? Can you get somebody that can drive you after your surgery? She said, because I cannot put you on a official public schedule. It's, I'm going to find a corner in an operating room and I'm going to do this on you. But I'm only going to know if I have room 2 days in advance. And I was like, okay, but I get out of the military in 6 weeks. So please. And she did it. I believe I had 12 days left in the Air Force. And she did this surgery. I had no post-op care. I never went back. And that's it. I got it done.
Oh my goodness. First of all, she's an angel.
Amazing woman.
Yeah, she's one of those sort of hidden people that are doing incredible work. But this is insane. This is insane. Also, your reasoning is insane. There's just like, there's so many examples of sort of and symptoms of a sick nation in that story. The reasoning as well. We're going to get to the prison eventually, but there's so much for us to talk about, and I wanted to understand how your experience was in the military before. So obviously you had 12 days left, so it can't really be after, but how you felt dealing with your period in the military was treated.
Yeah, I think that entering basic training as like a 19-year-old, if I didn't hate my body before that, I 100% did after that. When you're in basic training, it was so weird how they needed everything to be in inspection order. And so there were 53 of us in a barracks, and I believe there were 4 or 5 restroom stalls. And they wanted every restroom break to be like 5 minutes tops, which, I mean, unless like we sat 3 to a toilet, like that's mathematically impossible. They were forcing us to hydrate. Every meal came with 3 12 to 16 ounce cups of fluid. And it was like, and all of the drill instructors were men. And so they were like, I don't understand why you can't fit that much liquid in your body. Like, you're not leaving the cafeteria until you've had these 3 cups of water. And then they're like, oh my gosh, the women always need to pee. Like, y'all females can't do anything. And I'm like, this is not for our bodies. So from the very get-go, it was like our bladders were constantly under assault. There were times when we were sitting in a classroom for 3 hours, and the way they would talk to you if you like dared express, my bladder can't take it anymore. I like literally became a master at like slowly peeing myself and then like
Oh my
letting
goodness.
it dry. Like, as it was crazy because the way that you would be screamed at and threatened physical abuse if like y'all needed to go use the restroom. And that was before my period started.
Right.
And then it was like, we could not have any trash produced overnight.
Right.
Yes. And the toilet paper in the restroom, the seal, like where you start pulling the toilet paper off, could not be broken overnight because that was inspection order. And I'm just like, but we are not men. But we also didn't have our own toilet paper.
Right. So basically you had no solutions for overnight. Like there was nothing you could do.
No, so if you had to change a tampon overnight, things like that. And I don't know if anybody in my flight had any sort of like incident, but I feel like if you had a period stain on your uniform in basic training, like they would just drag you out back and shoot you. Like, I don't know how you could survive that type of embarrassment and getting screamed at, like by these men. I only got my period once in basic training, thank God. But none of that process was in any way like accommodated for the fact that biologically we have smaller bladders. Where our bladders placed in our body, it's a lot more sensitive when we have to go use the restroom. And then what happens when you're ovulating or you're menstruating, not only what that does to like the products coming out of your body, right? It was just like, how do we make sure that you guys are physically hurting and then we're going to insult you for your gender. And the men just get yelled at because they're stupid. You know what I mean? Like if they make mistakes, they get yelled at, oh, because you're stupid, because you're acting stupid. And we're getting screamed at because of what we physically, inherently, biologically are. And it's like, you knew we were females. That's why we're in a female flight. I did not expect that it would be like a G.I. Jane type experience where our number one problem with you is that you're female.
Yeah, I wanted to also say I'm guessing the majority of women would go on long-term birth control to stop their periods for this very reason, right? Because they would it just sounds like it would be too horrendous to try and deal with. So you're doing whatever you can. You're getting IUDs, you're going on the pill, you're skipping the sugar pills, you're just trying to not get a period as much as possible. Do you think there's probably a desired outcome for the military if they've got these female soldiers? One of the worst things that could happen is they get pregnant or something like that happens. Do you think that it's potentially by design, or am I being a conspiracy theorist?
You know what? If it was by design, then they would have actually designed a birth control that works for us.
True, yeah.
I feel like when the military needs something, there's a lot of innovation that follows it. And instead, it is like kind of even more difficult than just going to like a Planned Parenthood and getting birth control. When I finally was able to go and get some birth control, it was like trying to get off duty for that appointment, since it wasn't like you're sick appointment, was difficult in the first place, and it was just like there were a lot of barriers to healthcare as a trainee once you get out of basic training, because we were in tech school for almost 2 years. And if you get pregnant in tech school, because as a trainee, like the way they view it is not, oh, like you're going to be a mother, like you're going to have a child, like we need to deal with this, right? It's as a trainee status, you actually you weren't supposed to be having sex. So this is evidence that you had sex. And so now you're going to be out of the military.
Holy crap. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I don't know, like the married women were able to get away. Like if you weren't married, you were not supposed to be having sex. And so that was like evidence of that. And so when I had my miscarriage in tech school, I was like low-key grateful.
Right, yeah. Well, also because you didn't want children. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I also didn't want consequences. So I didn't go to a doctor because I was like, oh my gosh, like they're going to catch me.
Right. This is really eye-opening. I want to go back to what you said about it felt like you were being punished for being woman, not being stupid, but actually being woman. And I'm going to use this to segue into our conversation about incarceration, because we did an interview with Miriam Vishniak last week, and she made a statement that said the cruelty that appears in prisons around sort of the withholding of basic necessities, period products, manipulation, it feels like it is a target on gender and not just general mistreatment. It doesn't feel like general, oh, this is prison, this is what you get. It feels like it is decidedly attacking women for being women. And I wanted to ask you, as we segue into this, do you agree with that statement that she made?
I 100% agree with it, because we are given the same amount of toilet paper that the men are, despite needing to use it every single time. And at one point in county jail, when we were out, one of the guards, instead of bringing us toilet paper, he came to our cell door and said, well, the jail is out of toilet paper. They weren't. We are out of toilet paper, but the men are using their sock.
My goodness.
I was like, we're not using our socks, bro. Give us some fucking paper. Like,
yeah. And then do we put the socks back on afterwards? Like, what are you suggesting?
I mean, I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did.
We're going to take a little break on that point to take you through some updates in women's health. You may not have heard these stories in the news, so we're bringing them directly to you. Stay tuned as we continue the interview after this break. Very exciting news in England. From next year, routine health checks for adults aged 40 to 74 will, for the first time, include questions about menopause symptoms and offer support to women experiencing perimenopause or menopause. Yes, this was not a thing. The change, announced by health authorities, is expected to benefit up to 5 million women. Healthcare leaders say the move recognises how common and impactful menopause symptoms can be and aims to improve access to care and reduce stigma. Supporters of the decision hope it will help many women feel heard, understood, and better supported during this important life stage. In cultural news, there is a new exhibition in Berlin titled Flow, the exhibition on menstruation. It invites visitors to explore the history, culture, and social discourse around menstruation. The exhibition presents around 100 historical and modern menstrual products, along with advertising, photographs, interviews, film, art, and personal stories, offering a window into more than a century of evolving products and attitudes. It aims to challenge taboos, confront period stigma, and give a voice to the experiences of people who menstruate, tracing shifts in societal views on normality, hygiene, gender, waste, and dignity. With about 200 everyday objects, media, artworks, and interactive installations, Flow encourages reflection on menstruation not just as a biological fact, but as a cultural and political subject, combining pragmatism, inventiveness, activism, and hope. Whether you're interested in history, gender issues, or social change, the exhibition offers a powerful lens on a subject too often ignored, unless you're here, which means that you want to be listening to a podcast all about periods. We will link this in our episode notes. In some really positive news, Australia is on track to become the first country in the world to eliminate cervical cancer by 2035. New data shows that in 2021, the national cervical cancer rate dropped to 6.3 cases per 100,000, down from 6.6 in 2020. And for the first time since monitoring began, no cases were recorded in women under 25. Survival rates are improving too. The 5-year survival rose to 76.8% in 2017 to 2021, compared with 73.9% in 2012 to 2016. Authorities highlight the success of early adoption of the HPV vaccine and a modern cervical screening program, which now includes a self-collection option to reach previously underserved groups as key factors. Still, there is caution. Declining vaccination rates and lower participation in screening in some communities could jeopardize long-term success. So go get screened, go get your jab. So you experienced 2 different systems, well, 3 in reality, because you had county jail, and then you had, I can't remember what you called it in your book, but like the in-between part when you're getting transferred to prison, and you ended up in an ICE facility, if I'm not mistaken.
I did.
And then you were in prison. So I think it's last week we had Miriam break down like all the differences in the American prison system and between jail and prison. And so I'd be really curious to hear about the experiences in those 2 different systems. So in county jail, that story you just told us from county jail, how was it? How was it for women in general? I mean, I think that story kind of paints a picture, but do you have anything else to add? I think there was a lot of camaraderie in the jail system, if I'm not mistaken, from your book and also from what others have said.
There was a lot of camaraderie because we didn't really have a choice. The way that most county jail systems work is that they have multiple pods or sort of like community cells for the men. And they're very careful not to mix gangs. They're very careful not to mix people on the same charges, or if 2 people were caught fighting, they're going to put them in different pods, or just different types of charges, right? And then they're like, oh, well, we only have 1 pod for the women because you are 1/10 of the population. And so that means that regardless of your charge, you will be put with everybody. We don't have the same sort of affiliation issues, but it did come up a couple times. Still being put in the same area. There was a time when there was a sex offender in our unit, I guess, and somebody that I became very much like, I still call her my baby sister. She was 17 the first time she was arrested, and they put her in that jail cell with us with that sex offender.
Right.
And then if the men do not get along, if they fight and have issues and they're just like, I'm not going to be with this person anymore, like you can't force me to be in a cell with this person, then they move them around. For us, it was basically we had to take turns in solitary confinement. That is the only other option, is rotating women in and out of solitary confinement. And the particular jail that I was at only had one solitary confinement cell, which I know that it was so medieval. It was the saddest cell I've ever seen. Like I always refused my turn to go because I was offered turns. They were like, Winner, you look really stressed. Do you want to go to the hole for a while? And I'm like, fuck you, no.
From what I've heard, it's pretty awful being in solitary confinement, right?
I mean, Geneva would say it's torture,
Yeah.
but not in the US.
No, it's a little holiday actually.
Yeah, it's a privilege. The only way we were able to game that system is that they only had one of them. One time, my friend flipped out and she got put in there. So we communicated with the men that they needed to have like a fight so that one of the men would have to be put in there and then we would get our friend back.
Oh wow.
So like,
Yeah.
I mean, every system can be gamed somehow, and then another example would be like my baby sister got arrested about a year after I first met her. It was a gang situation. She was fighting two other women that were from a different gang affiliate. And because the women did not have adequate housing, she was in like a 4x6 visiting cell. And then one of the other ones was in the solitary confinement. And then one came to the cell pod with us. And where my baby sister was, there was no bathroom.
Right.
And there were like one-way windows because it was the visiting room where she had so many cameras on her. And for 2 days straight, like she had to keep asking like, oh, can I use the restroom? When do I get to shower? It is so degrading constantly having to ask to use the restroom like that. Like it is a really big deal. And it's all because these systems expect us to be, 10%. But at no point, like when you are that low in the population, you are that low on the priorities, you don't get any of the same resources.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, the same toilet paper thing is just nuts. Is it an afterthought? Is it ignorance, or is it punishment? What would you say out of all of it? Like, having the same amount of toilet paper as a man, your little sister getting put into a cell with no toilet. I mean, that was necessity, I guess, because they clearly didn't have enough space to serve the needs that the woman had. But what would you say? Is it a mixture of all of them, or is it more weighted on punishment?
It is so like completely just based on incompetence. There was a Sunday in which we went without toilet paper for like 6 straight hours. We ran out at noon. And that's where it gets really concerning because it's like there were 8 of us and we couldn't get an officer to come to our cell block for 6 hours. If we can't get toilet paper, we can't get medical if there's an emergency, right?
Yeah.
And I got in so much trouble for this, by the way. I got on the phone. My mom called the front office and was like, hey, so the ladies in cell block E, they need toilet paper. And so like one of the officers came and threw toilet paper in the cell block and they were like, Winner, stop fucking calling your mama for everything.
Right.
I'm sorry, we tried everything else. We tried our medical emergency button, which doesn't work. We've been waving at the cameras. There was another night where we were in the very same situation, right? And I was like, oh, well, I guess I can't call my mom anymore. How am I going to get some attention on the cell block? Because like when we just sit there and wave, they won't come because they know we want something. And so I was like, I knew the way they have the displays for the security camera of this county jail. If you go in through the front office, the front desk of that sheriff's office, and you look over the desks, all the security footage is up there. Like when you go into airports and there's the flight information, you can see inside county jail cells.
Wow. Okay.
As a civilian, including the women's, where we had to make our own shower curtain.
Yeah.
We had to cover our own toilet, but it was very visible. And I knew that. And I always use that to my advantage when we needed toilet paper. So I stood up on our table and I started doing a striptease. I started taking my clothes off. And so my ass was completely exposed and our door just got kicked open. And I just heard a voice, "Winner!" I was screaming because they didn't have any females on staff at that point. And so I took off. I went running behind our like tattered shower curtain and started getting dressed. And he was like, "Winner, get to the door, get to the door, come here right now, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, "I can't, David, I'm naked." And he was like, "That didn't matter 2 minutes ago." So, I composed myself and I went to the door and he was just like, "What the F are you doing? Like, what is your problem? You can't be doing that. Everybody can see it." They had male inmates up front cleaning the office. He's like, "We have male inmates that can see you." And I was like, "We need toilet paper, David." He was like, "That's it? You did this for toilet paper?" I was like, "Can I have some toilet paper?" And I swear he just like slammed the cell door in my face. And then like 2 minutes later brought back toilet paper.
Right. It worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
No consequences. And that's kind of like one of the things about jail and prison that made me worse getting out than when I got in, is that if you need something, you need to find out how to act just crazy enough for them to give it to you because you're so inconvenient to deal with. So I actually got deprogrammed as a person, as an adult, because I learned that if you kick and scream and act crazy and do these crazy things, you will get what you want. And because like you're acting crazy, you're not going to have any like serious consequences.
Right. Yeah. There's two things I want to say on that. One of them is sort of in our conversation with Miriam last week, she was saying about if prisons are made to be rehabilitation programs, and the research is very clear that women's self-worth and self-esteem is essential to success after release. How does that align with this sort of, I know that a lot of prisons are sort of saying that they're implementing workshops and they're designing their systems around this idea that these women have to have self-worth and self-esteem. I feel like I'm hearing two very different stories here, because you're saying I had to sort of act almost like an animal in order to even just get basic necessities. That cannot have been good for your self-worth, I imagine.
No. And that's like the insidiousness of it and how they get these recidivism rates to increase, right? They need us to fail and come back into the system. Because it's kind of like when you're already a membership of something, it's like it's a faster checkout, right? If they already have your address, it's easier for them to put you back in prison if they already have your information. And so they rely on this deprogramming where I didn't notice that this was a problem until I was home.
Right. Yeah. Until you had to sort of come back into society and you noticed a lot had changed, I imagine.
Yeah.
Okay. There was a line I wanted to tell you in your book. I am not your enemy, by the way, to our listeners. There was a line that made me cry, actually. And it was when you're in a jail system, and I wish I had it highlighted, and I'm sorry if I butcher this, but it was when you first got into jail, and there was a woman that helped you with phoning your mum for you because you didn't have the tokens or whatever you needed to call your mum. And she did it for you. And she said, "Oh, I'm a mum." I'm going to cry now. Maybe it's because I'm a mum, or maybe I'm about to get my period. I'm emotional. But she said, "I'm a mum. Of course I'm going to do this." And you said, that's who America is putting into prisons. Mums who would do something like this for another woman in jail. Did you find a lot of that sort of support as well throughout the system in other women?
Yeah, I mean, everybody had a mom. This woman was insufferable, but another woman came in and her name was Red, just like Orange is the New Black, right? Like there's so many people with that name. And I think that, she came in July, and I guess because my birthday was this past week, I remember my first birthday in jail, and she was just so nice to me on that day. And I just remember like it just came out of me, and I was just like, "Yeah, thanks, Mom," saying that to her, even though like despising just who she is, having to live with somebody that close, but like in that moment, she was just so like motherly.
Yeah.
And things like that happen really fast. I remember when I first got to prison, there were two women that came up to me and they presented themselves as mother and daughter. And they weren't. Like, I found out a year later, that's not her biological mother.
Yeah.
They looked just enough alike, and they were about 22 years apart in age. And I just completely bought it.
You're like, what are the circumstances that you're both in?
I know. How did you guys get locked up together? This is horrible. And then, oh my gosh.
That was a really nice thing I read in your book, because it's really heavy. Not so much, obviously, the whole doing the crime part was fantastic to hear from your point of view, because I know that there's been documentaries and movies and articles and everything. You've got a Wikipedia page. You're quite a famous person in this regard. But then the biggest focus for me of the book was your experience in the prison system. And so you spend a bit of time in jail, and then the rest of the book is sort of prison. Taking it back to the core topic of this conversation, how did you see the women around you experiencing their periods and dealing with that? I know you didn't particularly experience one, but you had cellmates, friends. What did you see while you were there?
So even in prison, there were kind of like off and on toilet paper shortages. It would be as arbitrary as getting a new counselor that week. And the old counselor would give us 2 rolls per week. And then this new counselor would just be like, no, y'all get 1 roll per week. And then everybody would panic. And on the commissary, toilet paper is approximately $2 per roll. And almost like to make fun of us, that toilet paper is the same, if not worse quality than what they give us. So like, I don't know how it could be worse than 1 ply, but it was
Half a
for
ply.
$2 a roll. Yeah. So it was like, okay, toilet paper is always going to be an issue. And that's just something that you've got to figure out. It was actually cheaper to buy wet wipes than toilet paper.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of women did have the means to make that happen. It wasn't really until COVID, which I don't understand if we're federally supplied, how we were impacted by a toilet paper shortage, except the officers took our toilet paper.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
So we know that's a thing that happened. They took our toilet paper, they took our bleach. In particular to the period products that were free, the pads were like a perfect oval, but they were like 2 inches thick. And I don't know if the adhesive is in the room with us, but they didn't stick to anything. So like, and then some of them, it was either like that weird, it was like an oval shape that had nothing to do with the human body, or there was one that was like an entire foot long. And it was just like a diaper. And so it was like, neither of these were really appropriate. Neither of them really stuck. There were a couple times where I was spotting and I would try to use those just like, okay, well, let me just grab something that's free. And they would like disintegrate as you wore them.
My goodness.
Taxpayers are spending $32,000 a year to house me here. I only need these products once a month, and they were so bad. And the tampons, now, and this might just be like a very privileged United States thing. I don't know how tampons are in, developing nations. But it was like the roughest, they were just like, how do we spitefully make the roughest tube of cardboard possible? You know what I mean? Like the edge that it's not tapered in any way, shape, or form. It's just raw, dry ass cardboard.
Right, yeah. So like we want you to feel pain while you insert this tampon, essentially.
Exactly. It would be like maybe if you were on like your heaviest flow moment of your entire life, that might lubricate it somehow. But like these tampons were so bad that, we could buy like the Tampax Pearl, like the nice ones. They were $10 a box on commissary.
Yeah, I've heard it could take 2 weeks' wage essentially to buy one box of tampons,
if you had a job. So we can talk about that in a second, because like the prison economy, having a job, you're required to have a job, but there aren't enough jobs.
And who supplies the jobs?
Exactly. So it was like having like an internal economy where people could afford pads and tampons and they could sell them for stamps or pastries was really, really important. So the gaslighting, they would give us these very terrible, low quality products. And I don't even want to talk about like the toxins that could have been in those tampons that were, once you get it into your body, like
Mm.
what is happening to your body. So people used them to wash their dishes.
Ah,
It was a tool. In some times, because we weren't allowed like paper towels to clean, the restroom details would have to use pads and tampons to clean sinks, mirrors, toilets.
right. Okay, yeah.
So when we were caught doing that, they would then not send as many period products to the unit because we're misusing them. And so I'm pretty sure they sent that data back to the Bureau of Prisons and were like, so the women are misusing the products because there's too many products. They probably have more arguments as to why they shouldn't provide free period products to women in prisons based on the fact that they gave us the lowest quality possible and then did not give us any other supplies to clean with. And so it's like you use what you have and then that is used against you.
Yeah, this whole misuse of property is something that really boggles my mind. I heard this story. It's a bit of levity in the conversation, but I did hear a story of an ex-prisoner who she'd had these tampons and the casing, like the cardboard that was in them, had gotten wet when she got them. They were wet. And so she took them out and lined them up next to her cot because she didn't want the tampons to get wet. And a male guard came and was like, "What are you doing? What are you doing with those tampons? You can't use them like art. You can't display them like that." And she said, "Oh, these are wet to dry tampons. If you want to use them, you actually have to air them out for like 2 to 6 hours." And he was like, "Oh, okay then." And because he was so ignorant, he had no idea, right? And just she was about to get punished for misusing the period products, but it turns out the officer had absolutely zero idea what a tampon was or how you use it. I've also heard on a darker side that things like if you accidentally have a leak on your prison property, be it sheets or uniform, you can get punished for that. Did you ever see anything like that?
I did not. I mean, I would be terrified to have like blood displayed, but we had the strongest cartel at our prison were the laundry ladies. And it was like you were assigned like a washer and dryer time. It's like a 45-minute period where like you are authorized to use that washer and only you can use it. If you are 2 seconds late, the laundry cartel is going to take your washer and you're going to have to pay like $10 for them to wash your load at their convenience. So instead of doing that, most people just paid to have their laundry done. I guess where we are, if somebody had an incident, they could always just go to laundry and get it done.
Mm.
As far as punishment goes, if you wind up on things like suicide watch or, in the hole and you're being denied these things, on suicide watch, they can only give you like 2 to 4 sheets of toilet paper individually at a time. And you have to ask for it. And you're also in a gown. You're not allowed a blanket. And I can't imagine being on suicide watch to begin with, but being on your cycle during that. And then obviously, like the majority of officers are male, having to have like men see that. And I know they see that because, having candid conversations with them, they talk about it. They talk about what they've seen other women do. And it's like, I would rather die than be one of those stories.
Yeah, a thing that came up was about how a lot of women who are in the prison system have been the victims of abuse in their life, and then having to sort of deal with these male prison officers and talk or ask for access to things when they're feeling particularly vulnerable. But imagine if you have PMDD or anything like that as well, just sort of re-traumatizes a lot. It's like a very traumatic experience for a lot of women, and also this sort of withholding. I'm glad to hear that at least, as even if they were absolutely rubbish, there were period products in the loo, because I hear that in a lot of prisons and across America, they're supposed to be, but they're just not there at all. And so, as like you were saying, you have to ask for it. Like you have to ask for extra toilet paper or toilet paper to begin with, and it can be withheld and used as sort of like a tool for manipulation and abuse. I want to ask. I know that you're doing a lot of work on, correct me if I'm wrong, but you just believe in the abolishment of women's prisons. Is that correct?
I believe in the abolition of almost all prisons, especially in the United States, simply with our history of slavery and the fact that the first police forces, like our nation didn't just develop police forces because of general security. The very first police forces in the United States were militia slave patrols. And we've never really gotten away from that. And then the moment that the 13th Amendment was signed that replaces slavery with incarceration, we've misused it. And I know, like, historically, like other empires have wrongly incarcerated people. I mean, we learned from the English, who were just like incarcerating children left and right in the Tower of London. So I guess it is part of our heritage as a nation to use incarceration as a tool to torture people instead of like, hey, you can't stop killing people. We're just going to have to remove you from society, right? In my mind, the abolition has to just start from the top down and just remove the option to incarcerate individuals entirely from this country, because I no longer trust my government to make those decisions and to have the privilege or the authority to make these, to target people or to actually remove dangerous people. I mean, I did not realize that I would be having this talk in 2025. I did not realize it would get that far, but like when I got out of prison 4 years ago, or like when I was in prison, thinking about like how to talk to people about that. Cause I always, like, when I talk about prison abolition, my go-to example is like the Hannibal Lecters, the serial killers and stuff like that. And, you know, I've always just been like, there's digital monitoring and there's also ways where the worst of the worst offenders can live in communities that don't have access to our communities. And it's very much like the men's prison anyway, where it's like 90% of the punishment is the other men that you're around, and that 90% of these offenders are going to be men, and that you just turn off the internet for that area. Like, why do they need access to internet? But why do they need to be in cells where we are only turning these correction officers into offenders? People sign up for that job because in some cities, that is the only entry level position that doesn't require a college degree. You're going into this job and the system turns these people into offenders. You know, it's like, yeah, some of the people sign up for that. They are cruel people, but I've also watched officers come in and change and become offenders as they work in the system.
Mm.
And it's basically a massive money laundering system by the United States federal government, where they're taxing people to pay for these incarceration institutions, and then they're making the money off of it.
Right, yeah.
You know, they're paying themselves to house us while telling the people that it's the only way to keep them safe, when it's like, these prisons exist because you caught people after they committed a crime.
Yeah.
If it was that important, our country would spend more time preventing crimes instead of locking people up. And so I've just been like trying to figure out how to talk to people about that, how to have these policy solutions, and then using like the fact in our prison, like so many of the women that I have been incarcerated with, they're doing amazing things now. The recidivism is always behind like paperwork, or, oh, you're on probation, but we found an outstanding warrant from when you were 18 and you shoplifted. And all of a sudden, because you're on federal probation, that becomes a felony and you're back in prison.
Right.
Almost all recidivism is based on like these minor technicalities.
Right. So they're just looking for a reason to sort of bring people back into it.
Yeah.
This has been super eye-opening. Did want to say, I think that I saw something in like Norway or Denmark. They have a great prison system, right? They put a lot of money into social constructs, and then their prison system that they do have is not like a punishment system. It's like a rehabilitation program where people get removed from society, but they get like the help that they need to sort of maybe re-enter society at a certain point.
They get their own apartments and you get to lock your own apartment door, and you're in charge of getting up and feeding yourself. I'm sure there's a cafeteria like college, you know what I mean? But you get up and you go to work. That for people has just been incredible. Even the violent offenders, I believe that they have a few violent offenders in those. I've really studied it. There was an experiment in Colorado, here in the United States, where they found that behavior in one of their institutions, it was a very low level security institution, when they allowed the inmates to have real furniture. Like imagine you walk into like a hotel lobby and there's like an upholstered chair, like a real fucking piece of furniture, and a coffee table. When they allowed the men to have access to real furniture, the violence in that unit went down 80%.
Right. Because they were treated like humans.
Like the simplest things, letting people have like soft walls, have some way to cover the cinder blocks, little tweaks like that. It didn't even feel like a prison anymore. And so then like the community complained because it didn't look like a prison anymore and they had to stop.
Yeah, this is actually about exactly the same place that I ended the podcast with Miriam on. We were talking about like, as a society in general, we really have to look at ourselves and see if this is actually a solution or what has happened to our humanity when we're willing to strip the humanity away from others into the prison system, and so gleefully too, like, so, wow, it serves you right, you should do that, you should have that because you did that. We are running out of time, so I wanted to say thank you so much. I mean, we've talked about so much in this sort of past hour, but as the menstrual justice activist over here, I want to highlight to our audience that is because periods affect every part of our life. So there's a lot to talk about. And I really want to say thank you for coming and sharing what you saw in your experiences. Do you have any closing words you want to say?
No, I mean, the way you say it affects everything, even though it's once a month and not every woman has them. It's almost like the way people view it, the way we view it ourselves as women, as being gross or being inconvenient, being dirty, being unpure. That's just how we're viewed in general. And it's like, it's not even a metaphor anymore.
Yeah.
And you can see that in the way that our patriarchal government systems, once they have to put us in the same institutions as men, once we're allowed to be in the military with men, once we are put in regular prisons and not insane asylums or women's institutions where, they're like, oh, if we can't lobotomize you, we're just going to put you in a men's facility like that. And the way it's treated as just like another thing to try to manage and keep clean is very much how society just views women in general. And I feel like until we start looking at periods as something that is clean, is natural, is normal in these institutions, we're not going to start looking at women as clean, natural, normal creatures, as human beings.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll finish on that because that is a beautiful summary of why this topic is so important. To everyone listening, remember you can buy Reality's book, I Am Not Your Enemy. We're going to share it in the episode notes. I really recommend it. Honestly, I couldn't put it down. I woke up at 5 a.m. to finish it one morning just because I couldn't stop thinking about it. And it's really important that you hear from Reality herself and not through other people retelling her story. So thank you again. Tune in next week when we talk about hormones. Thank you so much to Reality for coming on and sharing her experience and giving a voice to so many others. It's truly empowering hearing not only what she went through, but how she's now using her pretty famous platform to actually help women and people incarcerated and shed light on just how awful it really is. She actually goes into a lot of this in detail about her various experiences and the lead up to her imprisonment in her book, I Am Not Your Enemy. And she's a fantastic writer, so I really recommend getting a copy. As always, please feel free to reach out to us and please, please, please share this episode and give your voice to women incarcerated. The more we're talking about it, the more chance there is we will see some change. This concludes our prison series, but join us for the next episode when we will be talking all about hormones and the menstrual cycle. Ciao. M-Talk is brought to you by the M-Scale, helping you find a clean and safe loo to manage your period with our app. You can download it from the Play and App Store and leave reviews for some stellar loos or name and shame those underperforming. Every review counts.